Good evening. Welcome to Donkey Talk. I have the privilege tonight of having Dave Denger on our show. And Dave is running for State Senate 36. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on board. We want to know all about what's going on with you. And so, can we start with when you were young? What kind of made you become a Democrat?
Sure. Well, how far back do you want me to go?
Were you that little?
Well, my mother, she likes to brag that the first election that I ever got to experience was in 1980 when I was just very, very little and I was on her hip and she took me with her to go vote for Jimmy Carter. So I guess you could say she probably influenced me a little bit with that. But of course, growing up on the farm in the early '80s here in Iowa and going through the farm crisis here as a child, I mean, I really didn't fully understand just how tough things were. But having a lot of family members that were union members, of course, John Deere was on strike at the time, and with the farm crisis, I heard a lot of expletives, I guess you could say, around the dinner table around some of
Sure.
government policies for farmers in the '80s, directly a lot of the Reagan administration. So even though we did grow up, relatively the stereotypical Iowa conservative family, we've definitely held folks accountable or different elected officials accountable, and from my perspective, it has always been much more favorable when we've had Democrats in office. So, sure, it's going back to a very early age.
So, your family have been Democrats too. So,
Uh, quite a few of them, sure. We have our disagreements, and some of us choose not to talk politics right now. Like a lot of families out there, you get set in your ways and you dig in your heels, and it's tough to have those conversations with family members and close friends. But we're all very respectful to each other. But
that's good. Haven't they been affected by the financial aspect of it, though?
Well, like I said, especially in the '80s, you could really see that. We were able to survive on our family farm, but a lot of neighbors did not. And I mean, if you grew up in the early '80s on a small farm in rural Iowa, that was like almost like reliving the Depression years for a lot of people. So, to me, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but I know that's, we're going back almost 40 years now, and I think a lot of folks have kind of forgotten how, when we say things could get worse, they have been worse, and
Yeah.
it wouldn't take much to go back to some very, very difficult times.
So you went through high school. Did you go to college?
Yeah, I graduated from North Tama High School in Traer, and of course I joined the Army Reserve when I was 17. Went to basic training between my junior and senior year, and my thought was, this is a good way to get a college education.
Right.
This would have been back in '95, and of course I graduated early from high school, and I got a job working at the packing plant in Tama, running a forklift. So at that point in time, all I wanted to do was make money to buy a pickup and help my grandfather farm. And my father had been a over-the-road truck driver, so I knew how to drive a truck. And so I was thrown into going to work right away. So as far as college goes, I didn't go back to college until 2016, just a few years ago. I decided it was time for a change, and it had gotten more involved with politics, and it was clear I was not going to be able to do as much as what I wanted with just a high school education.
Right.
I had started off at Hawkeye Community College here and graduated from there, and then went to the University of Northern Iowa to study political science and international relations. I was on track to graduate here last May, but of course with the COVID-19 situation.
Oh, no.
I had one class that was canceled here this summer that I was supposed to take, so I was only 1 credit short. So I'm currently taking 1 class in the evening at UNI. Right now, we just started here last week. Just 1 class, 1 evening every other week, and then I can officially say that I've graduated from UNI here at the end of the fall, here in November, December, when we'll finish up. So.
That's awesome. You were a go-getter. Working, going to school, running for office.
It has been quite an experience the last few years. You know, going from somebody who grew up on helped my grandfather farm up until about 10 years ago when you know we'd sold our farm when he passed away, driving a truck. All of these things you would not think of, and then all of a sudden dropping everything to go back to get a education at a local university. Go Panthers! And
I think that's great.
Running for office, yeah. So.
Well, look at the background you have. I mean, you have a background with people and with the farming communities, and I was quite a bit of that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, rural Iowa is still very much, agriculture and farm-based, and to have that kind of a background here in Iowa, might not do you quite as well in, say, Des Moines or Iowa City or something, but especially in a district like mine, that really sets the foundation for what you need to be able to relate to anybody within the district.
So what really triggered you to run for Senate?
Well, since we have a limited amount of time, I'll try to keep that short, but the main thing that really got me involved with politics was the state's handling of Medicaid here in the state of Iowa. I have a younger brother who is severely disabled and has had to rely on Medicaid his entire life. And the way that was handled and the failure to make any corrections since that change, I mean, literally most of, or at least my current senator and representative from my district won't even acknowledge that we have a problem with Medicaid, and I see it firsthand, and I talk to people that have dealt with this, and it's not just patients now, it's providers, especially in small communities in rural Iowa that are struggling to get paid or not getting paid enough, and that's just absolutely I would call it criminal, that kind of behavior from our state government. So going back a few years, that got me motivated to become more of an activist, to write, to call, to show up, to do what I can for something that I felt was a completely misguided
Unacceptable
policy decision. So yeah, that was kind of the trigger that got me more involved. My mother, who actually went back to college later in life herself, was a mental health care worker over here in Independence at MHI, dealing with children. And about the same time they closed MHI, they closed that clinic with no resources to backfill what those children needed. A lot of them were sent to other clinics out of state. It was just, I can't believe that the Iowa that I grew up in is turned into what I'm seeing right now. This is not the same place that I grew up in, and it makes me very, very disappointed. And of course, what better way to try to make the changes that you'd like to see than run for office and be a change maker yourself.
Well, that's, I've always been a Democrat myself. And I've been a delegate a couple times. But when President Trump got elected, I can't say anything unless I step up and take the reins.
Sure.
And that's why I got involved in Central Committee, and everyone else out there, if you really want to know what's going on, come to the Central Committee meetings down at the Democratic office. They're every third Sunday of the month. Well, actually, now they're not at the office. You have to go online. But you can come to my Black Hawk County Affirmative Action page, and I post all of that, so you can get on there and you can check it out. It's time to get involved. And I'm really seeing women stepping up. I love it.
Yeah.
Women are coming out of the woodwork right now.
Yes. The number of women candidates over the last 2 cycles, 2018 and of course this year, and a lot of minority and people of color that are stepping up. You know, you think of Iowa as being the, you know, this white bread state, and there is just such a diverse number of people running for office right now. It really is amazing, and I really look forward to winning this year and being able to work with them.
That'd be fun, won't it?
Getting into next year's session, absolutely.
Okay, so I'd like to know what your philosophy is different than Jeff Edler, who's now the senator for the area that you're in.
Sure. I guess to just put it in the simplest terms possible, you know, I try to look at things in a political frame and just look at people.
Right.
You know, what works best? What can we do that is going to be the best for the most people? And sometimes that might be, you know, more of a conservative solution. It might be, I mean, just going by my own ideology, to probably a little more left of center. But I have no reason to not sit down and work with anybody from either party or with from any ideology. But you know, when we start talking about policy, we need to be putting people first. And what I've seen here over the last few years is it's more about keeping political power for the party that's currently in power and benefiting, of course, you know, larger corporations have just done fantastic here in Iowa with tens of millions of dollars of you know, tax credits, research tax credits here, and small town Iowans and small farmers, public schools have all gotten the short change, you know, with funding
Why would
cuts.
you attack education? That is so important. That's what we need the most.
Sure.
Right now, with especially our young children.
Yeah.
I can't.
I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and you know, a public school education here in Iowa at that time was world class. You know, anybody around the country knew, you know, Iowa was, if not the first, we were always at the top, you know, 2 or 3 states. And you know, we still have a very good public school system here, but every year we consistently just drop a little bit more.
Well, they cut money.
Sure. Going back here the last, you know, roughly decade or so, you know, funding cuts have not kept up with inflation. There's been the attacks on public employees, especially teachers, with you know, cutting their benefits and the whole Chapter 20 issue a few years ago. That you know, there's no reason. There's no reason to be fighting teachers in schools like that, because you're shortchanging our future with, you know, cutting the education to our children.
But you know, I started a class after school. It was like the inner artist, and I had like 7th and 8th graders, and it was like a 2-hour class. I'd have to go home and take a nap afterwards. These teachers are amazing.
They really are.
It takes a lot of energy.
They really are.
To work with the students and educate them.
Yes.
So kudos to them. I want to touch on the, I noticed you wrote down here something about the water, which I'm real adamant about myself, and our environment.
Sure.
So can we touch on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, environmental issues here in Iowa, and especially water quality here in Iowa, has not received nearly the attention from our state government that it should have. Now, these are, of course, you know, priorities of mine, but, you know, this year with COVID-19, and now with the recent storm damage here, you know, it just seems like every day there's something else that comes up that we have to deal with. But I want to make sure that this remains, you know, one of my priorities going into the future. You know, water quality, excuse me, here in Iowa is one of the worst in the country. You know, we're currently producing enough hog manure here, about as much as about 1/3 of the entire population of this country, human, and it is just a ridiculous number of hog manure that we're dealing with here in the state of Iowa. Now, I completely support farmers. I completely support our economy and our ability to raise and efficiently raise such an enormous amount of pork and food for the state and this country and this world, but we have to be able to do it responsibly, and it's clear that we're not doing that.
We're not doing that.
Right, and you know, the longer that we go and we don't address some of these issues, it's just going to exponentially get worse every year that we do not do something about that.
I know. I have that reversed osmosis in my house, and people come and drink my water, and they'll go, "Oh, your water's so good," and I go, "I won't drink water that isn't purified."
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that sad? Because you used to get minerals out of water. Water used to be really good from the wells, but now the chemicals go into the.
Yeah, I mean, and especially for vulnerable groups, children and older folks, you have to have treated water right now. I mean, it is just simply not safe to drink in a lot of places here in Iowa, and that
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly.
It shouldn't be.
Absolutely not. And really, the solutions for that are not. It's not rocket science either. Simply, having buffer strips in certain areas, filter strips. There was a period of time in the, in the 60s and 70s and 80s that we had policies and incentives in place between the state and federal government that helped farmers pay for waterways and buffer strips, and a lot of things that over the last few decades have all been plowed up, and we've
Taken
gone
away.
to what is the absolute most efficient way to grow a corn crop, and water quality comes in as an afterthought. And I think a lot of farmers that I've talked with, they don't want to be treated as the problem, but we need to be able to talk to farmers so that they can be responsible for the solution to this problem.
And be educated on it.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about whether it's soil erosion or nitrates or pesticides or anything in the water, a lot of farmers need to realize these things have value to them. And when they're in the water, they're not doing the job that they paid for on their fields. So what we can do to try to keep these things where it is applied in the field is from an economic standpoint, very beneficial for farmers who do this. So when they see this stuff in the water, they should not look at this as, a threat to them. They should look at this as a loss of value, that they have paid to raise a crop.
And my brother, when he first switched to being an organic farmer, they all laughed at him because the first year he was full of weeds, because he didn't know what he was doing. Then he got into bioegg, so then he got the calcium right and the stuff in the soil. He had twice the crop as the farmers that were using the pesticides or the chemicals that they use on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of studies out there that the research is pretty easy to find, with, going to certain types of tillage practices and organic farming and having, especially like native prairie, deep-rooted prairie strips, buffer strips, cover crops. It might take a few years for them benefits to be realized, but after 3 to 5 years, farmers are seeing those. So how do we incentivize to make that hurdle, that leap to make that commitment, because it will pay off in the long run for all of us.
Well, that goes back to marketing, isn't it? Got to get you in there. That's what we got to do.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I want to say this real quick. If you want to contact him or you would like to help him out with a donation, you go to www.dagnerforiowa.com. That's his website, and there's a button on there where you just push the button and you can help him get in there. And actually, it will help the farmers in the long run, because there's been a lot of farmers die from all the chemicals that they're using on the crops, inhaling them. My brother was telling me about that.
It's a dangerous occupation, of course.
Yes,
You're around a lot of chemicals and a lot of equipment that can be very dangerous, and it's not just that. I mean, of course, healthcare. That ties directly into healthcare and mental health care issues as well. So,
diet.
I digress. But,
I'm totally with you on that. But I wanted to touch on the environment real quick. We only have a couple minutes, I think, left. So.
Okay. I mean, we focused a lot on water quality, but I think here in Iowa, especially here in the last 2 weeks with the severe storm, the derecho that came through, now is a word that we all know what derecho means. This is not the first one that we've had. We had one in 2011 that I lost my house from in Tama County, and we had one in '98 that hit southern Tama County, but these storms hit largely rural areas. Now that this one has hit urban areas, everybody's paying attention.
Yeah, that's right.
But what I'd like to make sure that we all know is that this is not this is not a new thing. These are, these 100-year storms that are now coming every few years. We had the floods in '93 that took out Des Moines, and in 2008 in Cedar Rapids, and then just last year along the Missouri River in western Iowa. We can't go more than a couple of years, and we're having natural disasters here in the state of Iowa. These are not new. We're used to extreme weather, but this is just going to become more frequent and more extreme weather events that we need to prepare for.
Okay, we're at the end of the show. I'd like you to tell, there's a camera right
Oh,
there.
sure.
Okay, just tell the people what your final statement is.
Well, my final statement here, of course, is that we need a change in government here in Des Moines. We need to put people first and put politics second. We can't continue on this trend. It's definitely time that we put a check on Governor Reynolds as well. I think she's not on the ballot this year, but I know a lot of people have been very frustrated with her work, and we're not able to do that until we take back the House and the Senate this year as well.
That's right. So get out there and vote. Vote, vote, vote. And now this big thing with the mail, with the post office. I think I'm just going to go down and vote myself personally, and just make sure that my vote counts, that everybody can do it the way they want.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Dave, for being on the show, and thank you for watching the show. Again, if you'd like to contact Dave and help him out with funding his new Senate seat, it's www.dagner, D-E-G-N-E-R, for Iowa.com. Thanks for watching the show, and thanks again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We are in this together, molding the earth with our hands.
We are in this together. Unity must be our plan.
Unity must be our stand.
Rebirthing new thoughts, questioning our wants.
Spreading our wings, freedom will sing. Oh yes, we are in this together, molding the earth with our hands.
We are in this together. Unity must be our plan.
Unity must be our stand. May love pierce your heart.
God's truth be your strength.
You know our children depend upon the message that we send. Oh yes, we are in this together, molding earth with our hands.
We are in this together. Unity must be our plan.
Unity must be our stand.
Emerge hand in hand for majestic